Sienna God. Hello all. Good afternoon, Wado. Thank you for watching. So this is day 2, part B of reading Propaganda by Edward Bernays. In relation to industry, the ideal of the profession is to eliminate the waste and the friction that result when industry does things or makes things which its public does not want. Well, that's true. Or when the public does not understand what is being offered it. For example, the telephone companies maintain extensive public relations departments to explain what they are doing so that energy may not be burned up in the friction of misunderstanding. A detailed description, for example, of the immense and scientific care which the company takes to choose clearly understandable and distinguishable exchange names helps the public to appreciate the effort that is being made to give good service and stimulates it to cooperate by enunciating clearly. Yeah, I need to enunciate. Anyway, it aims to bring about an understanding between educators and educated, between government and people, between charitable institutions and contributors, between nation and nation. The profession of public relations counsel is developing for itself an ethical code which compares favorably with that governing the legal and medical professions. In part, this code is forced upon the public relations counsel by the very conditions of his work, while recognizing, just as the lawyer does, that everyone has the right to present his case in the best light. He nevertheless refuses a client whom he believes to be dishonest, a product which he believes to be fraudulent, or a cause which he believes to be antisocial. One reason for this is that even though a special pleader, he is not dissociated from the client in the public's mind. Another reason is that while he is pleading before the court of public opinion, he is at the same time trying to affect that court's judgments and actions. In law, the judge and jury hold the deciding balancing of power. In public opinion, the public relations counsel is judge and jury because through his pleading of a case, the public may accede to his opinion and judgment. He does not accept a client whose interests conflict with those of another client. He does not accept a client whose case he believes to be hopeless or whose product he believes to be unmarketable. He should be candid in his dealings. It must be repeated that his business is not to fool or hoodwink the public. If he were to get such a reputation, his usefulness in his profession would be at an end. When he is sending out propaganda material, it is clearly labeled as a source. The editor knows from whom it comes and what its purpose is, and accepts or rejects it on its merits and news. Chapter 4, The Psychology of Public Relations. The systematic study of mass psychology revealed to students the potentialities of invisible government of society by manipulation of the motives which actuate man and the group. Trotter and Lebon, Lebon, and Trotter is Trotter, who approached the subject in a scientific manner, and Graham, Graham, Wallace, Wallas, Walter Lippmann, Lippmann, and others who continued with search-in studies of the group mind, established that the group has mental characteristics distinct from those of the individual, right, and is motivated by impulses and emotions which cannot be explained on the basis of what we know of individual psychology. I saw this thing one time where like the FBI or CIA, I can't remember who, I feel like it was FBI, put in there in a survey thing or whatever, the group, where they're trying to see like if they can get somebody to change their opinion or whatever. Actually, okay, so I think it was like a group of like, say, 9 people. 8 of them were agents. 1 of them was not, right? It was a civilian. And they showed a shape, and it was like a square or something like that. And one guy was like, that's not a square, that's a circle, right? And then the group like slowly started going. And then do you know, when they got to old dude who was the civilian, he literally looked at it, knew that it was a square, and was like, it's a circle. Isn't that crazy? Anyway, distinct from those individuals is motivated by impulses and emotions which cannot be explained on the basis of what we know of individual psychology. So the question naturally arose, if we understand the mechanism and motives of the group mind, is it not possible to control a regiment and regiment the masses according to our will without their knowing it? Oh my God. The recent practice of propaganda has proved that it is possible. at least up to a certain point and within certain limits. Mass psychology is as yet far from being an exact science, and the mysteries of human motivation are by no means all revealed. But at least theory and practice have combined with sufficient success to permit us to know that in certain cases we can effect some change in public opinion with a fair degree of accuracy by operating a certain mechanism, just as a motorist can regulate the speed of his car by manipulating the flow of gasoline. Propaganda is not a science in the laboratory sense, but it is no longer entirely the empirical affair that it was before the advent of the study of mass psychology. It is now scientific in the sense that it seeks to base its operations upon definite knowledge drawn from the direct observation of the group mind and upon the application of principles which have been demonstrated to be consistent and relatively constant. The modern propagandist studies systematically and objectively the material with which he is working in the spirit of the laboratory. If the matter in hand is a nationwide sales campaign, he studies the field by means of a clipping service, or of a corps of scouts, or by personal study at a crucial spot he determines. For example, which features of a product are losing their public appeal, and in what new direction the public taste is veering. He will not fail to investigate to what extent it is the wife who has the final word in the choice of her husband's car or of his suits and shirts. Scientific accuracy of results is not to be expected, because many of the elements of the situation must always be beyond his control. He may know with a fair degree of certainty that under favorable circumstances, an international flight will produce a spirit of goodwill, making possible even the consummation of political programs. But he cannot be sure that some unexpected event will not overshadow this flight in the public interest, or that some other aviator may not do something more spectacular the day before. Even in his restricted field of public psychology, there must always be a wide margin of error. Propaganda, like economics and sociology, can never be an exact science for the reason that its subject matter, like theirs, deals with human beings. If you can influence the leaders either with or without their conscious cooperation, you automatically influence the group which they sway. But men do not need to be actually gathered together in a public meeting or in a street riot to be subject to the influences of mass psychology. Because man is by nature gregarious, he feels himself to be a member of a herd. Even when he is alone in his room with the curtains drawn, his mind retains the patterns which have been stamped on it by the group influences. A man sits in his office deciding what stocks to buy. He imagines, no doubt, that he is planning his purchases according to his own judgment. In actual fact, his judgment is a melange of impressions stamped on his mind by outside influences which unconsciously control his thought. He buys a certain railroad stock because it was in the headlines yesterday, and hence is the one which comes most prominently to his mind because he has a pleasant recollection of a good dinner on one of its fast trains, because it has a liberal labor policy, a reputation for honesty, because he has been told that J.P. Morgan owns some of its shares. Trotter and Laban concluded that the group mind does not think in the strict sense of the word. In place of thoughts, it has impulses, habits, and emotions. In making up its mind, its first impulse is usually to follow the example of a trusted leader. This is one of the most firmly established principles of mass psychology. It operates in establishing the rising or diminishing prestige of a summer resort, and causing a run on a bank or a panic on the stock exchange, and creating a bestseller or a box office success. But when the example of the leader is not at hand and the herd must think for itself, it does so by means of cliches, pat words, or images which stand for a whole group of ideas or experiences. Not many years ago, it was only necessary to tag a political candidate with the word interests to stampede millions of people into voting against him, because anything associated with, in quotes, the interests seemed necessarily corrupt. Recently, the word Bolshevik, oh my God, I gotta look them up, y'all. Oh my God, no way. This was written in freaking 1928, and this same stuff is going on right now. The same. Ooh, Bolshevik, Bolshevik, has performed a similar service for persons who wish to frighten the public away from a line of action. By playing upon an old cliche or manipulating a new one, the propagandist can sometimes swing a whole mass of group emotions. In Great Britain during the war, the evacuation hospitals came in for a considerable amount of criticism because of the summary way, SUMMARY, I'm probably saying it wrong, but anyway, in which they handled their wounded. It was assumed by the public that a hospital gives prolonged and conscientious attention to its patients. When the name was changed to evacuation posts, the critical reaction vanished. No one expected more than an adequate emergency treatment from an institution so named. The cliche hospital was indelibly, associated in the public mind with a certain picture. To persuade the public to discriminate between one type of hospital and another, to dissociate the cliche from the picture it evoked, would have been an impossible task. Instead, a new cliche automatically conditioned the public emotion toward these hospitals. Men are rarely aware of the real reasons which motivate their actions. A man may believe that he buys a motor car because, after careful study of the technical features of all makes on the market, he has concluded that this is the best. He has almost certainly fooling himself. He bought it, perhaps because a friend whose financial acumen he respects bought one last week, or because his neighbors believed he was not able to afford a car or that class, or because its colors are those of his college fraternity. It is chiefly the psychologists of the school of Freud, Freud, who have pointed out, and I want to read a book on him that like totally blows everything out of the water, which is Crazy Town Banana Pants. But anyway, who have pointed out that many of man's thoughts and actions are compensatory, I said it, substitutes for desires which he has been obliged to suppress. A thing may be desired not for its intrinsic worth or usefulness, but because he has unconsciously come to see in it a symbol of something else, the desire for which he is ashamed to admit to himself. A man buying a car may think he wants it for purposes of locomotion, whereas the fact may be that he would really prefer not to be burdened with it and would rather walk for the sake of his health. He may really want it because it's a symbol of social position and evidence of his success in business, or a means of pleasing his wife. This general principle, that men are very largely actuated by motives which may conceal from themselves, is as true of mass as of individual psychology. It is evident that the successful propagandist must understand the true motives and not to be content to accept the reasons which men give for what they do. It is not sufficient to understand only the mechanical structure of society, the groupings and cleavages and loyalties. An engineer may know all about the cylinders and pistons of a locomotive, but unless he knows how steam behaves under pressure, he cannot make his engine run. Human desires are the steam which makes the social machine work. Only by understanding them can the propagandist control that vast, loose-jointed mechanism which is modern society. The old propagandist based his work on the mechanistic reaction psychology then in vogue in our colleges. This assumed that the human mind was merely an individual machine, a system of nerves and nerve centers, reacting with mechanical regularity to stimuli, like a helpless, will-less automaton. It was the special pleader's function to provide the stimulus which would cause the desired reaction in the individual purchaser. It was one of the doctrines of the reaction psychology that a certain stimulus, often repeated, would create a habit, or that the mere reiteration of an idea would create a conviction. And that's what happened, that freaking FBI thing where they had all of them agents and then one dude was civilian, like, yeah, that's a square. It's not a square, that's a circle, man. And he was like, it's a circle. You know? Anyway, suppose the old type of salesman acting for a meat packer was seeking to increase the sale of bacon. It would reiterate innumerable times in full-page advertisements, I was going to say advertisements, in quotes, eat more bacon, eat bacon because it is cheap, because it is good, because it gives you reserve energy, end quote. The newer salesmanship, understanding the group structure of society and the principles of mass psychology, would first ask, end quotes, who is it that influences the eating habits of the public, end quote. The answer obviously is, end quote, the physicians, end quote. The new salesman will then suggest to physicians to say publicly that it is wholesome to eat bacon. He knows as a mathematical certainty that large numbers of persons will follow the advice of their doctors, because he understands the psychological relation of dependence of men upon their physicians. Which makes me think of all the other things, like drink all of this cherry juice because it reduces inflammation. Yeah. But then you're going to like deplete yourself of electrolytes because it's a liquid, and then end up making yourself allergic to it because you're consuming so much and whatever. Was there a run on cherries? Were they fixing to go bad and they just had to move them? Like, who knows, right? The old-fashioned propagandists using almost exclusively, and yes, we did eat the cherries and we drank the cherry juice. I'm just saying, right? That was back when I was listening to everything that was, being put out on those TV shows, like the doctor shows and whatnot. The old-fashioned propagandists, using almost exclusively the appeal of the printed word, tried to persuade the individual reader to buy a definite article immediately. This approach is exemplified in a type of advertisement, I said it, which used to be considered ideal from the point of view of directness and effectiveness. And this is in quotes, you, and then in parentheses, perhaps with a finger pointed at the reader. By O'Leary's rubber heels now, end quote. The advertiser sought by means of reiteration and emphasis directed upon the individual to break down or penetrate sales resistance. Although the appeal was aimed at 50 million persons, it was aimed at each as an individual. The new salesmanship has found it possible, by dealing with men in the mass through their group formations, to set up psychological and emotional currents which will work for him. Instead of assaulting sales resistance by direct attack, he is interested in removing sales resistance. He creates circumstances which will swing emotional currents so as to make for purchaser demand. If, for instance, I want to sell pianos, it is not sufficient to blanket the country with a direct appeal such as, in quotes, you buy a Mozart piano now, it is cheap. The best artists use it, it will last for years, end quote. The claims may all be true, but they are in direct conflict with the claims of other piano manufacturers and in indirect competition with the claims of a radio or a motor car, each competing for the consumer's dollar. What are the true reasons why the purchaser is planning to spend his money on a new car instead of on a new piano? Because he has decided that he wants the commodity called locomotion more than he wants the commodity called music? Not altogether. He buys a car because it is at the moment the group custom to buy cars. The modern propagandist therefore sets to work to create circumstances which will modify that custom. He appeals perhaps to the home instinct, which is fundamental. He will endeavor to develop public acceptance of the idea of a music room in the home. This he may do, for example, by organizing an exhibition of period music rooms designed by well-known decorators who themselves exert an influence on the buying groups. He enhances the effectiveness and prestige of these rooms by putting in them rare and valuable tapestries. Then, in order to create dramatic interest in the exhibit, he stages an event or ceremony. To this ceremony, key people, persons known to influence the buying habits of the public, such as a famous violinist or popular artist, and a society leader, are invited. These key persons affect other groups, lifting the idea of the music room to a place in the public consciousness which it did not have before. The juxtaposition of these leaders and the idea which they are dramatizing are then projected to the wider public through various publicity channels. Meanwhile, influential architects have been persuaded to make the music room an integral architectural part of their plans, with perhaps especially charming niche in one corner for the piano. You understanding how they're doing this? You don't need that stuff. They make you think you do, and they make you feel guilty for not getting it and going into debt for it. Okay? Less influential architects will, as a matter of course, imitate what is done by the men whom they consider masters of their profession. They in turn will implant the idea of the music room in the mind of the general public. The music room will be accepted because it has been made the thing, and the man or woman who has a music room or has arranged a corner of the parlor as a musical corner will naturally think of buying a piano. It will come to him as his own idea. Tanto ko hain kakayo na kachas kay tuwi again love you minute.